This is Saturday Morning Mysteries.
And we're your hosts, Alexis and Grace.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Saturday Morning Mysteries, the first episode. What up?
With Alexis and Grace.
So this is a vlog / pod, depending on like your listening and viewing pleasure and preferences. That's combining some of our select favorite things. We're taking true crime and putting it to cartoons because we basically realized that like a lot of those cartoons were mysteries to whatever extent, and we could talk about them as if they were true crime episodes, because why not? It's 2022. We can do whatever we want.
We figure this is something that everyone can enjoy, no matter what stage of life you're in, whether you're still a kid or, well, maybe I don't know about kids, depending on the language that we use or how descriptive we get with some of these crimes. But nonetheless, if you like cartoons, you'll like this.
So that's what we're going to do today. We're starting with, I think maybe our mutual love of, I don't know, for me at least, one of my top cartoons of all time. I know you and I, for many years, have shared this love of Scooby-Doo.
Yes.
So that's where we're going to start. Before we launch into our stories, though, like what is it about Scooby-Doo for you that like just icing on the cake?
Icing on the cake. I always like an anthology series, and not to say that Scooby-Doo is full-on anthology, but just a different story every episode. You know, so you don't have to get too tied down in like one overarching dramatic storyline. So I always like that. I guess that's most cartoons, but something about Scooby-Doo is different because it's like your villain of the week type of thing.
Yep.
So that was always it for me. And plus, like when you're little, who doesn't like a goofy dog who can talk, you know?
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. I just remember growing up, though, at one point, my entire bedroom was Scooby-Doo themed. I don't know if I ever showed you pictures of that. Yeah, I like legitimately went from Pocahontas to Scooby-Doo, like overnight, like had bed sheets, stuffed animals, blinds, a little dresser, all this stuff. It was like, I guess I must have asked my parents for that stuff. I don't think that they like forced me into an obsession with Scooby-Doo. But I totally think they were happy to indulge that obsession because it was like something that they could relate to as well. Because like you think our parents watched Scooby-Doo when they were maybe not growing up, but when they were like teenagers or getting ready for college. So I think that's the other part.
I'll have to text Steph to get those pictures of your childhood bedroom.
Oof, yeah. We'll see if she has them. I hope she doesn't. They may have burned in an accident or something.
Caused by you. Another mystery for us to unsolve.
Alexis, I would have gotten away with it too.
Word for, except your beagle Reese is the for you meddling kids, and little chunky Reese being like, "What up?
What up? What I do? Is there food in here for me?" Anyway,
so that's what we're gonna do. We each picked episodes from Scooby-Doo. There's a lot to pick from. Depending on which era of Scooby-Doo, we have no rules basically of like we chose whichever ones we felt like. So we're gonna tell you 2 Scooby-Doo mysteries and how they, maybe botched investigations most of the time, but how they eventually unravel and get solved. Who wants to go first? You want me to go first? Do you want to go first?
You want to go first?
All
right.
You
can go first.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Great. Because I started with Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Which is like the official first season of Scooby-Doo ever.
One that started it all.
Yeah, which I guess I didn't realize until I was like going through HBO Max that like they were only like 2 seasons each, and then they would like switch the name to like a different Scooby-Doo blank blank blank.
Yeah, demo research. Who knows? I don't know back then how they got Nielsen ratings, or if they did. They didn't have cable boxes to like track that stuff, so who knows?
Yeah,
this is what the kids are saying these days.
I love you. Great. Well, I did write. I'm happy to go first because I did try. I did include a bit of a full painting the picture in which Scooby-Doo actually premiered. Because I chose the very first episode of the very first Scooby-Doo Where Are You Ever to just start us off in a way. I don't know if strong, I don't know if it's the right word. But
in a way.
To start us. Okay, here we go. Oh, this is also season 1, episode 1 of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And it's called A Night, or What a Night for a Night, which is a pun. It's like night and then like K, knight.
Like a fighting night.
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
We'll get into it. Don't worry. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, the year is 1969. President Richard Nixon took office that year as the Vietnam War raged on. Yeah, we're gonna get a little dark here to start, I guess.
Wow.
Woodstock went down in history as a gathering of free love, drugs, rock and roll in our beloved Ohio, which again, where we're from. Cleveland's Cuyahoga River set on fire because of pollution levels. The Stonewall Rebellion in New York City goes down as corrupt police abuse the LGBTQIA plus community. The Beatles released Abbey Road, made their final live appearance. I guess that was across the pond though, but I included them. Sorry.
That had worldwide global influence.
Exactly. Yeah. Amid years of growth, the police and the government endlessly tried to hamper the civil rights movement and straight up kill a lot of Black Panther members across the country. In California, the Zodiac killer is at large, and the Manson family cult and their eventual killings go down that year. On a slightly happier note, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. Pretty neat. And on September 13th, 1969, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Premieres for the first time. I don't know what channel, but it premiered somewhere. So Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Brought us the iconic theme song that, as it turns out, I still know all the words for, and I'm sure you do too.
Rent-free. Lives in my head rent-free.
Constantly playing. It brought us Hanna-Barbera, which was I don't know if it's still a company or not, or like production company still.
Yeah, just owned by Warner Media, aka Warner Brothers, HBO, all that umbrella.
Right. Good for them. Good.
Comcast.
I hope they got bought out nicely.
Or AT&T. Sorry. AT&T.
Oh yeah. Oh God, they do own a lot of stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I mean,
gotta love conglomos.
Conglomos, baby.
Yeah.
Which also Hanna-Barbera, for those from Cincinnati or anyone in the Midwest who's enjoyed Kings Island, they used to have like a full section, which it's a theme park for those who are not from Cincinnati. And it like had a whole Hanna-Barbera section of all of the cartoons themed rides. It was amazing.
They had a Nickelodeon section too.
Yes.
They somehow managed to have Nickelodeon and Hanna-Barbera all at the same park. Amazing.
Right next to each other.
You'll never see that ever again, I don't think.
No.
Companies hate each other too much to have that sort of collaboration.
Yeah, there was like straight up like the Scooby-Doo haunted house ride where you'd like sit on the I don't know, little thing. You'd like go through tunnels, and there was always like a Scooby-Doo like I don't know, like mascot dressed up. We have a picture with, I'm sure, somewhere from our high school days. There was some like slime Nickelodeon ride like right next to it too. I can't really remember it. It was great though.
It was like Slime Time Live for Ohio.
Yes.
So they never actually filmed there because Florida is like way better.
Yeah.
But they still had like a similar setup anyway.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It also brought us, it turns out that I had forgotten about, and maybe it was just in this early season, but a laugh track in a cartoon, which was a choice that they made. But
a choice.
Yeah.
We won't say which way, but
a choice. And most of all, it brought us decades of mysteries to solve. So we're going to get into it here. Again, season 1, episode 1, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? A night, or what a night for a night. Again, to emphasize the pun involved here. So today I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story of actually 3 crimes, including a story of a ruthless gang and ultimately a story of bad museum security, which I think is the true takeaway from this story. Although I do want to flag that this, again, 1969, this was like 20-ish years before my favorite art heist of all time, which was the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, which is still unsolved. It has like a $10 million reward out for information. Yeah, on like the heist. There's a great, I think it's like WBR Boston podcast series called Last Seen, and it goes into this heist, and it's my dream come true.
I feel like we're about to change all of our focus from this podcast onto like a national treasure type of adventure where we from opposite sides of the country are like researching this. Although if a podcaster after doing multiple episodes couldn't figure it out, then I have no doubt that we would be able to figure it out too. But anyway.
If like professional investigative journalists couldn't figure it out with all of the evidence.
Pshaw.
Pshaw. Maybe they weren't looking at the Declaration of Independence, which we will now steal.
I know all of the secret nooks and crannies in Washington, D.C. You lift a stone, Perfect. Find a key to the ancient crypt that houses whatever. Yeah.
Good. We'll ignore all of the other like historical evidence that's in those things and just get we're gonna get that 10 million one day.
Yeah,
probably.
Help us out.
Yeah, we'll do it. It's a favor for them, but we want the money, obviously. So Shaggy Rogers and his faithful, and a kind of essentially genius, all things considered, Great Dane, Scooby-Doo, are walking through their woods on their way home from a movie and stumble upon this abandoned, kind of like rusty-ish, kind of shitty truck. And despite all of the hitchhiking serial killings throughout the 60s, which would have probably indicated that you like shouldn't approach a random abandoned vehicle on like a side creepy road, they obviously still waltz right up to the truck. And there, the truck is completely abandoned. There's a suit of armor, though, in the front seat that's empty, and then an empty, like, crate box in the bed of the truck. And rightfully spooked, they did, like, tap on the armor as well, and it was hollow, and they were like, this is weird. So rightfully, they ran instead of getting murdered. Stupidly, however, they came back, but they just brought their friends with them. Said friends, make up Mystery Incorporated or Mystery Inc., who will be, the stars of all of our Scooby-Doo episodes, obviously.
Our humble protagonists.
Oh, those humble teenagers, which is weird to think that they're teenagers.
By the way, after rewatching a lot of these episodes, I'm like, wait a minute, but anyway.
Yeah, well, that can be a side quest for us to go down. So they come back to the truck and they see a note and an address on this empty box. And on the box, it says the shipment was meant for the museum or the county museum, which going on to Scooby-Doo.fandom.com, I learned that they live in Coolsville. So the Coolsville County Museum. And it has the name of Professor Jamison Hyde White on this label, but there's no professor to be seen anywhere. So we're going to backstep a little bit to earlier that evening where we explore our primary crime, our first crime, the disappearance of Professor Jamison Hyde White. We're just going to call him Professor. He's got a long name. It's too much. Which also it's like a 3-name type of thing, which makes me think that he's maybe a serial killer because they always go with 3 names, like first, middle, last name.
You can't trace me if I have multiple names, right? Wait, so, okay, I want to make sure I got this right. Yeah. The last name is Jamison Hyde White, or the first name is Jamison, and the last name is Hyde-White.
Okay, his first name's Jamison, which Velma is like, it's a British name, Shaggy. So she's cultured. And then... I don't know. I think maybe his full last name is Hyde White, but I don't think there's a hyphen. So it makes it seem like Hyde is his middle name.
Okay.
I don't know.
Or maybe it's just like Hyde White, one word, which is weird, but it's Scooby-Doo. So, hey. Sometimes I think they just like look around a room and think of like, boom, okay, your last name is Beigewall.
Okay, you're hiding in the corner and you're wearing a white shirt. Hyde White.
Hyde White, boom.
Perfect. But so we'll just call him the professor from here on out. It's a little easier. So the professor, again, too long of a name, was in the process of transporting an ancient artifact from England to Coolsville, USA, where he was going to display it, I guess, at the county museum. He had personally overseen the transport of this item going by boat across the Atlantic, by train across the continental US, and now somehow was driving a kind of crappy pickup truck with precious historical artifacts in the bed of it. This is, I don't know, came off as kind of careless to me, not to, crap talk the victim here, but like I would assume that it's usually the intern who has to like transport all of the artifacts. But in my watching of this episode and research here, I kind of took that the professor is like a take no shit, I'm gonna take care of this business myself kind of a guy, and like he's not gonna let an intern be in charge of something as big as this, like transcontinental transport. So, not on his watch. This was a big find for him, his life's work, and he wasn't just going to hand it off to like a summer intern to like go on international journey.
Bit of liability there. A little bit.
Exactly. Like when I was an intern, I didn't want to do this kind of crap. I was just like, no. I don't know.
Even getting coffee could be too much for an intern sometimes.
It sounds like personal experience, Bert. Have you had an intern recently?
Don't get me started.
And so in my, again, assumption of the professor here, he seems like a very proud man. Again, someone who wasn't just going to let some summer intern take this under their wing. And to me, perhaps too proud for something happened in transit, something that I don't think he could have ever imagined. But let's pause and talk about the artifact in the bed of the truck, or what eventually was then in the passenger seat of the truck.
Yeah,
as its key, to the entire mystery. So the Black Knight, as it's called, is a tall black full suit of armor with a red like plume on top. So that's like the, I don't know, like feathery thing. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see me doing like a little chicken on the top of my head.
She's waving her hand over her head as if I should understand. It's like the ponytail looking thing that comes out of the helmet.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. I did have to Google it I just called it the feather thing, and I was like, there has to be a name for this. And I do also want to note
Thanks, Webster.
Exactly. Thanks, Wikipedia. That in like some scenes the plume is there, and other scenes it's not there. And I think that's just like there was not tight editing going on in 1969. So we
should do another episode talking about cell animation, because I don't want to get too off track, but I totally understand why they did that after learning about cell animation and the way that they used to direct these shows back then.
Yeah.
Had to cut some corners.
I don't know what that is. So yes, we should have a deep dive into it, because that would explain a lot of the inconsistencies I saw in this first episode.
Perhaps as bonus content. We'll see. We'll talk about it, but stay tuned and see a video about us talking about cell animation more in depth. Anyway.
Ooh, we're fancy now. So my estimation, based on nothing except I think it would make the story cooler, that this suit of armor is from the Knights Templar. So while traditionally, based on, again, wikipedia.com, the Knights Templar is usually like a dark armor with like a red cross on it somewhere. Like none of us were there. They didn't have actual photos of it. So maybe this knight was like, I'm going to put the red on my ponytail plume, not on, I don't know, my sash. Yeah, he was a little sassy of a knight. No one could tell him what to do, which was maybe his downfall as well. But for those who don't know, the Knights Templar was basically this like old school, like 1100s to 1300s Catholic military, which like, yeah, religions obviously have militaries back then and now. Again, neither here nor there.
Religious laws got to be enforced, all right?
Get it together. So think like Crusades times, lots of violence, lots of murder in the name of Christianity, lots of unchecked power. Also of note is that they controlled like a crap load of financial means. And apparently some people think they started the like what is now modern form of banking, which like is pretty interesting. So there you go. I guess
I did not know that.
Yeah.
You're saying this was the Knights of the Templar in particular who did this? Or you're saying, wow, okay.
Yeah, because they were just
I thought you meant like the Crusaders or like more broadly. No.
Nah, yeah, like these guys all about that gold and like somehow created, banking, which is a fun historical
I think we
note.
can both thank and admonish them.
Yeah, for probably many things, but that's the one high on the list.
I'm pretty agnostic, no pun intended, on their influence in that then. Anyway.
You're definitely going to get haunted by them now, I think.
I am. They're outside my door.
Little knock on there. So their fast and obviously violent rise to power, and then like this snap reduction of power because some pope was like not into it, which good for that pope, has made their history like really full of mystery and like legend. And I don't really know all that much about it, but like it's all spooky and stuff. But like the Knights Templar, our Black Knight here in this episode is also shrouded in mystery. So the legend of this Black Knight goes that when there's a full moon, this armor will awaken into like a sentient, perhaps even violent creature. And yeah, perhaps like reminiscent of the person who originally wore the armor, who was like probably pretty violent themselves. But despite that, the professor here is a man of fact, not of silly, ridiculous, unproven legends. He can spot a lie from a mile away and takes authenticity as a point of pride and honor in his work. And he's been like this, I think, ever since he grew up in, the countryside of England, in a place that had no history in any history books. His life goal is to turn that around for himself. And so he has this pridefulness about discovery and truth finding, which actually was perhaps another downfall for him in the end, because someone or something used it against him eventually. So, scene of the crime again. The professor is driving on this deserted road, transporting the Black Knight from the train station to the museum where he's going to be displaying it. He's come all the way from England, probably post haste, and was probably tired. So tired, in fact, that he apparently didn't notice his surroundings. For example, he didn't notice, or again, just didn't care that there was a full moon in the sky that night, nor did he, I guess, notice that the lid of the transport box suddenly started to creep open. He also didn't notice, apparently, the Black Knight rise from said box. So what happened next?
He's like not using his rear view mirrors whatsoever. No. Okay.
Nope. He's just like, this is shitty. I don't know. Maybe this truck was shitty enough that like they just didn't work. It was like rusted. It didn't look great.
Yeah. Terrible hydraulics.
He's driving on the opposite side of the road now. He's overwhelmed by this, probably. Like, he's like, why am I sitting on the left? I need to be on the right. This is America, not England anymore. It's all confusing. So what happens next is merely conjecture, as we have no official confession by the Black Knight to reference. But most likely the Black Knight was somehow able to silently or quietly enough move out of this box, and then able to silently, or I guess the ability to move silently to me means that like, this is not maybe the first time that a suit of armor has had to move stealthily, because that seems really hard to do.
I've been at this rodeo before.
Yeah, that's a whole other mystery for another time, I guess. We need to look into this history of this Black Knight. But it's my estimation that somehow the Black Knight was able to both grab the professor by surprise and the wheel of the truck, because the steering wheel, because the truck did not crash. So also a very dexterous Black Knight. Likely, I assume the knight took advantage of like the pure shock the professor probably had, because there was suddenly a suit of armor attacking him, and like probably frozen in shock somehow, because I don't like, you wouldn't just punch that right away. Probably you'd probably be like, what's happening?
You might break your hand if you did punch it too. So
yeah, which like also could have happened. Like, what, we don't know. But either way, the knight was probably like, probably gave him a little knock on the head. Probably didn't have to do it very hard, because it's literally a suit of armor. Safely was able to park the car, which is also pretty impressive that he knew modern technology, I guess. And then take the professor from the scene without a trace. But somehow the armor returns to the scene of the crime like a fool, I guess. But we don't know whether he was called back by the moon or by some other means. We're not yet sure. But what we do know is that now a foreign national, the professor, is missing on U.S. soil. So this is now an international crime. And we know somehow that this artifact is in the center of the crime. And that, again, going back to what we said at the start, is how our intrepid heroes find this suspicious scene. So after finding that abandoned truck, Mystery Inc., again, our heroes here immediately report the artifact to the Coolsville County Museum, which again was labeled on the box. And they transport the armor there somehow. I don't know if they like muddied up the scene of the crime or what, but they get it there. Yeah, we're going to learn quickly they're not professional status investigators.
They are not. Got fingerprints everywhere. Yeah. All that. Anyway.
Yep. It's a whole thing. So when they get there, they meet the museum curator, one Mr. Wickles, which I did have to like look up to see what his name actually was, because I was like, is it Wiggles? It was so weird, but Wickles.
Such a lost opportunity if it was called Wiggles, but
the like origin story of the Wiggles eventually is like they were a museum curator. So Mr. Wickles obviously thanks Mystery Inc. Profusely that they've delivered this artifact. And he's the one who tells them about the legend, which he's actually a very big believer of this legend of the Black Knight. We do meet some of the museum staff who are transporting the Black Knight and like setting him up for display. And like, they don't really seem ruffled by Mr. Wickles's like, I don't know, superstitions. You can see the like, we don't get paid enough for this shit, like in their eyes as they're moving it around. But Mr. Wickles, I will say, seems like pretty wigged out and pretty disturbed that the professor is nowhere to be seen. He kind of sees this as like the proving that this legend of the Black Knight is real because it came alive and took the professor away. And he seems actually pretty like nervous about having the Black Knight now in his museum, and because there's still a full moon in the sky. So he seems pretty wigged out by this. Museum staff, like, they don't give a shit. They're just like, this old man and his ramblings. Jesus Christ type of thing.
Enough.
Yeah, they're like, all right, sure, buddy. But I will say, we see a little bit of the county museum itself, and there's no telling how many other like creepy voodoo-y legends are within these halls. It's obviously full of, side note, asterisk, stolen artifacts from cultures around the world, and a lot of them
are not museums.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So just like in county or Coolsville County, they're on it too, I guess. Them and like the British Museum and every museum in the US. Anyways.
Coolsville, we're like everyone else.
Yeah, look at us. So, it's a pretty eclectic museum, and he's clearly pretty proud of it, despite what that could mean for his own safety. We'll get to that eventually, but he seems, again, a little creeped out. That's also maybe why he just passes it off to the museum staff, because he's like, I don't want to get involved in this shit. And I think it's important to note here that I don't really know why no police were brought in to like fingerprint the crime scene or the artifact, or maybe they did and they were like running it through the system, but I don't think there was a system in 1969, or maybe they were never called, which seems to actually be the case. And from this, I surmise that Coolsville is a city of vigilante justice led by Mystery Inc.
Say Mystery Inc. They are the vigilantes.
Yes.
I guess actually, yeah, in the most legitimate sense, they actually are. I mean, like, sorry, tangent here, but I'm a very big comic book fan, so I read a lot of comic books about vigilantes. And now that I'm like, actually, like, yeah, I mean, Mystery Inc. is basically like an amalgam of like half of Justice League without, superpowers.
Yeah. Just like the teenagers version of it.
I'm pretty sure they annoy the cops and the authorities just as much as like the X-Men annoyed the UN. So it's pretty much like apples and apples. But anyway.
Exactly. Vigilantes minus the powers.
Yes.
But I do want to take a second, as this is our first episode, to briefly give a description of who makes up Mystery Inc., since there are like official, unofficial, official lead investigation team, again, in this city of crime that they live in.
Vigilante justice.
Exactly. So first is the aforementioned Shaggy Rogers. Shaggy is like the 1969 token hippie. He's got bell bottoms. He's got the like unnamed in a children's cartoon munchies. We didn't realize what that was until we were much older. He doesn't really like have the nerves for solving mysteries, but he's like super laid back and just, like goes with it, man. But in this episode, I actually learned a lot about Shaggy, that he's apparently a great gymnast in their high school team. He's a ventriloquist, and he's obviously the bestie / owner of Scooby-Doo. Next is Scooby, the loyal Great Dane who can speak and like vibes with Shaggy on like a whole other dimension, man. I don't know how he also wound up solving mysteries, especially because he's like constantly terrified. And also Great Danes, with some, again, Wikipedia research, they were once working dogs, but we've like bred that out of them because every Great Dane I've ever known like sleeps 20 hours a day. Yeah. It's just like a lump, and also like can't do a lot because of their hearts like will explode if they exercise too much. But yeah, it's fucked up because of our breeding. I know, they're so cute. But he's like key to keeping Mystery Inc. together. So then we have Fred Jones, who's like the de facto leader of Mystery Inc. He's suave, he takes charge. He looks like he could be part of the Brady Bunch, which apparently also came out in 1969, according to Google.
What a good year. Crazy year.
Yeah, good description.
Anyway.
A lot of iconic things that year. And he like is pretty level-headed. I like can't really picture, again, I'm always like trying to keep in mind that like these are literal teenagers. I don't really see him and Shaggy sitting at the same like lunch table together in their high school, but like he actually seems really open to everyone and is really good. I'll give him some credit at like utilizing the gang's like strengths and like assigning them tasks based on that. So then we've got Daphne Blake, known as, the redheaded like bombshell of Mystery Inc., who I'm pretty sure she like funds all of these like teenage endeavors.
Has to.
She's
Rich
the cash.
Shit.
Yeah, exactly. She's the cash bank here. I called her the hands-on investor, the angel investor who's really into what she's like, the entrepreneur she's helping. She's like Shark Tank. But she brings sass. She brings taking no shit. She brings a 1960s stereotype of a damsel in distress a lot of the time, at least in the early seasons. And despite her tendency to get taken captive, I've noticed that she actually really encapsulates what is perhaps your and my one of our favorite songs, which declares, "I ain't afraid of no ghost." Because she like is never spooked. She's always just like, again, Jesus. And last but not least, we have the one who carries the entire team on her back, Velma Dinkley. Again, in 1960s stereotypes, she's like the nerd of the group who constantly is losing her glasses. My glasses, as she declares oftentimes.
I can't see without my glasses.
Yeah, and I often do that now as an adult wearing glasses. But she's the quickest at putting clues together, seeing through the BS to find the truth. Without her, I don't think Mystery Inc. would like ever solve a single crime. So that's our crew. And now that Mystery Inc. has a crime to solve, the disappearance of the professor, which hopefully they remember that's what they're there to solve. We're going to go down the path taken of how they solve it. And we're also going to go through the two other crimes that happened that evening. So before the gang even leaves the museum from this drop-off, we get our first clue and our second crime. So I know it's a twofer in many ways. So
they got bit off more than they can chew.
Truly.
Or I guess we'll find out. You'll explain to us how maybe they didn't.
Time will tell. I will tell. In fact, I am time. Hello. Welcome.
So nice to meet you.
We're uncovering many things today. Yeah. So Scooby is kind of like wandering, not really looking for clues. I guess he had no interest in like either helping the people, like the museum staff, or listening to Mr. Wickles like freaking out about the legend. But something catches his eye and he's like, "Hey, I'm in a museum. This is mine now," which I guess is like how all museums work. They like see something shiny in the world and they're like, "Huh, this is mine now." So I guess it kind of works. But he, whether on purpose or not, commits a theft for us to begin. Luckily, it's the theft of the first clue. So, do two wrongs make a right? I'll leave it to the authorities and audience to decide.
Right. We're going to get philosophical sometimes on this show.
Yeah, we're going to go real deep here. Was Scooby correct in stealing from this museum? The first clue, which is a pair of glasses. So Hansy McGee Scooby over here swipes this like pair of spectacles that remind me of like don't know what era, I don't know, like Edwardian or like Victorian era, like the like opera glasses that like fancy ladies would have, where it's like the little tiny ones with like the
handle. Okay.
Yeah. So like that's what they look like. But I guess apparently they're not opera glasses. They're a pair that are specifically used by archaeologists. Suspicious? Perhaps. But may I further submit, with some obviously clever research from Velma, doing all the legwork here at the library, that they're glasses that are specifically made in England. Very suspicious? Definitely, I would say. Actual evidence, though, to the gang? For sure. To an actual representative of the law? Like circumstantial evidence at best, I would say. And like DNA testing did not exist back then yet. So like they're like literally just a pair of glasses in a museum, probably filled with archaeologists who all have those glasses.
Professors, all sorts of,
right. Any archaeologist, maybe this is a specialty made in England and everyone has them. But alas, this is clue numero uno to the gang, and this ends up turning their entire investigation to the museum itself. So this focus of the investigation quickly brings us to our third crime, which is worth noting because as we learn the style of our investigative team here, we quickly learn that the law does not apply to them, essentially and apparently. This group of protagonists, because our third crime is a B&E, breaking and entering. So yeah, instead of just like getting a search warrant through a legal authority or just like asking to check out the museum the next morning, the gang decides to break into the museum under the cover of night. Yeah, they made it difficult. Also,
hey, vigilante justice, you break the law to resolve the law.
Again, existential questions here, philosophical debates here.
Was it a necessary evil?
Right, to solve this missing person's case, baby. Again, we'll let you decide throughout this. Maybe I'll ask at the end what your take is.
Yes. And drop some comments if you have your own take.
Yes, exactly. So as it turns out, to break into this museum is like super freaking easy. They just like get a ladder from the back of the Mystery Inc. van, which also we like see a peek of it. And it's like sketchy as hell in the back of that van. There's like lanterns, tools, ropes, first aid kits, like other scenes in this series. It's like empty in the back, but this one, it's like full of literal like crime and like murderer materials. It's real sketch. Anyways, Shaggy like goes up the ladder, somersaults through the museum window, and just adds on to this crime by like desecrating museum, like the collections in the museum, because he literally is toppling through a window and like destroying shit. So that's just gonna be an ongoing situation, and like too many crimes to add up as they literally destroy these artifacts as they go. And then obviously he also implicates the rest of the gang into his crime because he, lets them in now. There's no alarm system. There's no security thing anywhere. He just breaks into a window and then, opens the back door. But a very special note, as he is going to go let the rest of the gang in, he does pass by the Black Knight. He kind of gives it pause and checks it out. He again knocks on it, confirms it's immobile. The blinds are closed in the museum, so there's no full moon coming in. And it's empty. But as he does let the gang in, we do see that there is a full moon again in the sky, I guess because it's the same night. So that would make sense. Or it's the next night. I don't really know. Either way, there's a full moon.
There's a full moon still.
We're not going to get into moon cycles here. We're not like an astrology podcast. It's for someone else. But also a special note that this is like my literal dream, like being stuck in a museum overnight, like would do it in a heartbeat. The movie The Night at the Museum, like I could have written that from like childhood dream journals. This would be amazing. So how does our ragtag team of essentially juvenile criminals / vigilante justice seekers see out this investigation for a missing persons case? By splitting up and looking for clues, baby. Again, a tactic we will see over and over again with Mystery Inc. So before we get into the good sleuthing work that they go down into, let's go through some of the mistakes in this investigation, because no investigation is perfect, but if someone's life is on the line, the professor's, then time matters. I don't know if it's actually still true that the first 48 hours of like a missing persons case are the most important. Like, I think that's just like what's always said. There was that like show, The First 48 or something. Yeah. I feel like maybe science has like somehow disproven that. And it's like, I don't know. I'm not a forensic anything. So, don't quote me on any of that. But that's also to say that mess ups matter because they waste time and someone's life is on the line here. Mm-hmm. So in the line of mess ups, first, Fred and Daphne somehow entirely miss like a sarcophagus lid slowly and creepily closing behind them. So it's like moving on its own. I would assume
it'd be super loud too.
Yes. Thank you. My literal next note is that the museum is silent, and I assume they don't WD-40 sarcophagus lids.
There's no hinges.
There's no hinges. They didn't have like hinges in like ancient Egyptian times. It's just like they lift it on and off type of thing.
Like stone against stone, just like preaching.
Boom.
Anyway.
Yeah. So thank you. Yes, you have confirmed my first note about this botched investigation. They don't notice that at all. And then we've got the B team of Shaggy, Velma, Scooby. They obviously had to put Velma with the two who just don't really contribute that much to this investigation. But as they're looking for clues, all of a sudden, our good buddy, the Black Knight, like reanimates and is trying to like close down this investigation because he starts chasing Velma, Scooby, and Shaggy. Like, again, violently, terrifying. We do see that despite the full moon behind blinds, this guy is on the chase. He wants to get these detectives out of the museum, or worse, we don't know. But here's the other unforgivable mistake. In a classic moment of shenanigans and confusion, the Black Knight trips over Velma, who's looking for her glasses on the floor because Scooby knocked her over, because when the Black Knight started chasing them, Scooby was like, everyone's on their own. I'm out of here. Clearly not loyal dog at all. No. But as the Black Knight trips, he lands. This is like, when I was watching this, I was like, it's a kid's cartoon. He lands directly into like what I take as like a guillotine. Like, you know, when like the prisoners would get like locked up in like the wooden thing with like their hands and like head like locked like in that. That's what he lands in, and like it just closes on him. And I'm pretty sure that's what they would use for like eventual like guillotines or like public like floggings and shit. Yeah. So like dark that was just sitting there, and that's what the Black Knight lands in. So you'd think like end of at least the mystery to the legend of the Black Knight, because they could check right then, because the Black Knight is literally locked into this like prisoner thing. You know, and they could figure out what the Black Knight did to the professor. They could also like make an epic discovery of like if this legend is true. But instead, Velma gets her glasses on, and then she and Shaggy just like run because they don't notice that the Black Knight is like locked right behind them. So they just leave the room, and like the Black Knight is now trapped, but like they don't do anything about it. But that aside, let's focus on what they did do correctly in this evening. So at first glance, the first clue doesn't actually look like a clue at all. It just seems like an astute observation. So the apparently art museum aficionado, Shaggy, notices that a picture, I know, he's gymnast, ventriloquist,
art historian.
Art historian. Future museum curator. I don't know. But he notices that a picture is missing from one of the museum walls, and it looks pretty freshly taken, like based on the difference of like light and shadow of like where that's like outlining where the piece like should have been. And it's not. And so what does this mean for the legend of the Black Knight? What does it mean for the missing professor? And what does it mean for museum security, where apparently there could be more than one person breaking in a night to steal things and nobody is noticing? We don't know any of those answers. But Shaggy and Scooby, but you know, who can blame us? But Shaggy and Scooby do go and get the rest of the gang to be like, hey, isn't this suspicious? This is missing. Is someone else trying to break in tonight? Is that why it was so easy? But as they come back, the picture is back on the wall as if it was never gone. Is this a momentary lapse in Shaggy's potentially high brain, or is this a confirmation that it is a clue? It's a clue, obviously. So Shaggy's observation.
Could be both.
Yeah, you're right. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, kind of thing. So, yep, exactly. So Shaggy's observation, though, does lead us to a much more concrete clue spotted by Daphne, who seems just perplexed as to Shaggy and Scooby, like how they missed this to begin with, which, again, that kind of, I guess, goes into the botched investigation side of things. But either way, it worked out. Because at the base of the wall, like where the floor and the actual wall meet, right underneath the artwork, Daphne spots a pool of blood, just a pool of red down there. Let's pause for a second. Is this where this gaggle of amateur detectives call the authorities now that there's potentially a murder or violent assault on their hands? No. Frat boy Fred sticks his finger directly into the pool of red to check it out. Obviously, one, contaminating further this crime scene.
2, just super fucking gross. Excuse my language.
Disgusting. Yeah. Yeah, we'll mark this as explicit. It's okay. I've dropped multiple F-bombs so far.
Awesome.
Apparently, he is the professional in-house forensics lab because he immediately surmises, don't worry, this is just red paint. What this says about how much Fred has touched blood before, I will leave it to the listeners to surmise that journey. Anyways, this is the clue that keeps on giving because apparently, again, Shaggy and Scooby somehow missed that this paint, not blood, is splattered across the museum floor like a trail. So obviously, they follow it. And lo and behold, the trail leaves them to the sarcophagus that Fred and Daphne completely passed before. Which, I mean, I will give them some credit, not obviously to not hearing the sarcophagus closing, but does this mean that like they didn't notice the paint, or is it fresh and the culprits are thus still nearby? And also, why is it paint? We'll see.
True.
So in, again, a recurring theme of desecration and like no respect for artifacts, Fred just rips open the lid to the sarcophagus, just being like, well, it ends here. Let's see what happens. Like, is there going to be a dead body in the sarcophagus? We'll see.
Yeah, right. Do curses get unleashed from the sarcophagus? We'll see.
This is what if it was actually like, this is how Coolsville like became like this hub of crime was from this one like curse that Fred unleashed.
All these demons fly out. I didn't see that happen. I guess we're done with this mystery.
Yep, I guess we have a million more to solve now.
Yeah.
So he rips off the lid and reveals a secret room, essentially. Like the back of the sarcophagus is like fully carved out. There's no back to it. Instead, it's just like a tunnel into behind the wall.
So it's a sarcophagus that's like standing up against the wall. It's not like, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Flat. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Great question. Yeah, they don't like just jump down into like the dark depths, which is like
this hole.
Be kind of cool. But yeah, no, they don't do that.
They might break their shins, but you know.
And then they're the missing persons now.
They see the professor down there and he's like, I broke my shins, that's why I'm missing.
He's like, help me. They're like, we'll help. And they all break their shins and then like never, then it gets really dark. Really quick.
Episode ends, title credits roll or credits
roll. To black. Yeah, America did not need more darkness at that in 1969. That would have been not great.
No.
So I'm no museum expert, but I do love museums, have obviously dreamt of working in one. And I know that like they have like private rooms in the back and offices where like the preservation work happens. Like they don't do that out front. Out front is just like, look at the cool preservation we did. In the back, like some museums, like I'll give where I used to live in Utah, the Salt Lake City Museum, a shout out of like the Natural History Museum. They have like, you can see into some of the storage rooms and preservation rooms. And it's so cool. Some museums, you can like watch them working on like restoring the paint to things and like, cool. Yeah. And like, you can get a rabbit hole on this stuff. And it's like, they can like trace back like flecks of paint to like certain time periods. And like, they can tell like when it was last like touched up type of thing. They like have little chemistry sets to like imitate that old paint. Okay. It's super cool. But like, that's all of the back of a museum. That's why museums are so big. They got to do all of that work. But I will say the gang immediately surmises like this is not a back office or preservation room that like was cleverly behind a secret door. This turns out to be the biggest clue yet, which is there's some sketchy other shit going down at this museum because this back room not only is a mess, which like also is an indication that's not an official room because like, I don't know, museum staff probably has to be pretty organized. But there's like, this room is like full of blank canvases and art supplies, as well as various works of other art. But most sus, however, is that in the middle of the room, there's 2 easels, one of which has an old ass looking portrait on it. And on the other one is like a halfway finished replica being painted of said portrait. So I don't know how children would exactly put together that this means this is like an illegal like art replica black market situation going down, but like I guess we did as kids. Like they never explicitly say it right there, but like Fred and Velma are like, oh, we've solved this mystery now because we see this. I guess I don't know, they just knew that this is what like a black market crime scene looks like,
and like instantly know who must be behind the forgeries or like all that. Okay.
Yeah,
they have everyone's intentions already aligned.
Yeah, they're like, we got this. And then finally, now that they've solved it, Fred is like, let's call the authorities. Like, let's get them in here now.
He wants all the credit.
I think that's what it was. I think he must be like, remember like in the Incredibles, like the like kid who like loves Mr. Incredible and turns out to be the bad guy later. He's like inserting himself to help solve the like crimes. I think that's what Fred is doing. But anyways, as he makes this suggestion, finally, and like also let's keep in mind this is 1969, so there's not cell phones. They have to like go find a phone. This wasn't like,
oh my gosh,
let's call the authorities. This is more of a process.
It like takes another 20 minutes just to get to a phone.
Exactly. Like, and they don't know where the phone is in the museum. It's a whole thing. But just as he finally makes this finally smart suggestion, guess who busts in from another back door? The Black Knight, who clearly is like, y'all are hot on some trail. I'm going to throw you guys off of it and like, question mark, murder you, at least get you out of the museum. Why the Black Knight cares about this replication, yes, and forgery ring, unsure. We'll get to it. But in classic Scooby-Doo fashion, a series of shenanigans ensue, classic chase scenes, classic more desecration of things, also more like very lax security, because at one point, Shaggy and Scooby get into like a small propeller plane that fits in this museum, and like I guess the keys are just in it, and they turn it on and start flying in the museum. I don't know why the keys were in there still.
I like how you're focusing in on the keys being in it and not the motor or the anything like that. It's like a fully operational plane with keys in it on display.
In the fact that like it was ready to go as an escape hatch or something.
Fueled up everything.
There's fuel in it. Thank you. Yeah. Which also seems like a hazard. And also like Fred, Velma, and Daphne are hiding in like a tank, which also leads me to question, like, was this also an operational tank in the museum? It's unclear.
Also, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this, what kind of museum this is. Like a tank, a sarcophagus, an airplane.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Wickles has done a lot of work to curate like lots of education for the county of Coolsville County.
Respect.
Yeah, it's a lot. But anyways, all of that aside, well, I guess not aside, because Shaggy and Scooby crash the airplane, which does, luckily they're uninjured. But that's how they finally corner. Again, they could have cornered him earlier when he was in the guillotine thing, which also is another side note. He like somehow escaped from, but I guess he's like, he already escaped from a box. This is nothing. I don't know. Anyways, they finally corner the Black Knight, and Scooby rips the helmet off, finally ready to confirm the legend, or somehow, I guess, bust it open. They're just focused on the legend now. I guess they're expecting to see a ghost behind it. So what's below the helmet, we ask. And Fred and Velma, when they see it, they immediately are like, we knew. I don't know how they knew it, though. But let's go through our cast of characters to see, based on them, who could be wreaking havoc at this museum? Is it A, Professor Hyde White himself, the staunch anti-legend historian who is tired of his dry, boring, fact-based career and finally wanted to make a more sexy discovery and make it look like a kidnapping by a legend, finally saying that, like, yes, legends are real, they're here. I'm now a famous archaeologist. Or was it B, Mr. Wickles, the museum curator who wanted all of that glory that the archaeologists always get, again, on their like Indiana Jones type adventures. He finally wanted to make the headlines. He's done so much work in this eclectic museum and no one gives him credit. Or is it one of those museum workers who are disgruntled about their work here and are trying to actually hide this crime ring in the back halls of the museum? This essentially art forgery replication black market going on, and they're trying to cover their tracks. It was Mr. Wickles. I know. Wait, who do you think it was?
I mean, I kind of thought maybe the professor. Maybe that would maybe be a little too convenient. because he could just make it look like he disappeared himself. You know, like, oh, I wasn't actually kidnapped. I just like parked the truck and got out and then was like, help! You know,
I broke my shit in the sarcophagus. So while the authorities finally, who are called and arrive, say that
days later,
literally, what also like where's Mystery Inc.'s parents? Like,
yeah, right. That's a common theme. I feel like you will hear us saying that in just about every single episode that we talk about. Like, where are their parents? What time of day is it? Are you in school? Is it always not like just so many questions? Homework? But anyway,
is this a weekend only? Who knows? And so the authorities, while they claim that they would have never suspected Mr. Wickles as an art swindler, I personally scoff at this shoddy police work because most museum-based crimes are done by the employees. Most heists are inside jobs in museums, which, side note, is why the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist is such a mystery, because they were all cleared. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Anyways, so Mr. Wickles is the head of this crime ring, replicating arts or fine art and then selling those originals on the black market. And he's actually replacing the art in his museum with the fakes. So, like, lover of museum and art, this guy, he had it with the slow solitude life of running this county museum in Coolsville. He always wanted more. He craved that adventure and danger, again, that the archaeologists all get. They're off risking their lives in the name of knowledge and discovery, and he wanted the thrill like that. He was bored in just the county museum. Mr. Wickles thought he was good enough, nay, better than them, and he would prove it by tricking all of them and making, a little side cash. I can't imagine a museum curator in Coolsville County is that lucrative, but he was making that bank. So Mr. Wickles, though, his crime spree, his growing, monopoly of art crime was suddenly threatened by the fact that the professor was going to hand deliver this artifact. So if you remember, the professor, in my mind, was esteemed for his ability to separate fact from fiction and to call BS. And Mr. Wickles knew essentially that the professor showed up, he would realize that his museum was full of fake art. And Mr. Wickles was not going to risk the downfall of his empire to some Brit, essentially. So he had to find a way to silence him. And he decided to play up the legend of the possibly violent Black Knight to cover his tracks in the perfect ruse. So speaking of the professor, which was the actual mystery that they were here to solve, not the historic legend and not the art crime, the gang literally suddenly remembers that they haven't found him yet. They're standing there with the authorities talking about the art ring, and then literally one of them goes, "Oh yeah, the professor." Yeah. They literally got so distracted at debunking the Black Knight and uncovering this underground black market empire that they forgot about the original crime.
That poor professor.
I know.
Probably starving, by the way, but whatever.
He's probably he's like, this is how all Brits are treated in America. It's a whole thing.
I'm never coming back.
Yeah.
I wish we would have won the war.
These xenophobic Americans. So luckily, Scooby finds a random misplaced shoe in the museum, which is another botched thing of if they, had found this. I'll get to it in a second. So Scooby follows the scent and they discover the professor literally bound and gagged, in one of the museum artifacts. He's tied up. He had one of the masks and outfits of one of the artifacts were just thrown on top of him. So he looked like an exhibit. If they had found this shoe so much earlier,
like an exhibit, they walk by him in the gallery.
Yeah. Throughout the episode, and I didn't put this in earlier, you see its eyes wandering, following them. I don't know how he just didn't jump. I don't know. He could have probably found a way out, but again, not victim blaming. He was probably shocked and such. If they had found this shoe randomly in the museum earlier, they would have found the professor who could have probably told them everything.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Wickets is totally the guy that just kidnapped me, by the way.
Right. And he told me as he was kidnapping that it was to cover up this black market art ring that he has. He's
reciting his evil plan as he kidnaps him.
Oh, you knew that he would be. That's how they all do it.
Oh, yeah.
So as much as I'm shitting on these kids, I guess it was good that they followed their intuition of only going to the museum instead of, I guess, searching the actual crime scene, but no protocol. It's fine. So I'll end with, there's no way to tell what Mr. Wickles would have actually done to keep the professor quiet and his crime ring alive, which leads us to beg the question of how much darker this episode would have gotten. Because all we know is that Mr. Ink took down an art crime ring, took down a kidnapper and solving this missing persons case, and possibly prevented the murder of a British historian, because Mr. Wickles probably would have done anything to continue his art crime ring. The end.
The end.
A journey.
My goodness. It really does make you think the lengths some of these folks would go through. It's like, is that painting really worth like kidnapping and possibly murdering like 4 or 5 humans and a dog?
Right.
Like when you include the professor.
Yep.
Like, I mean, I know it's probably not that lucrative being an artist or a museum curator, but it's a middle class income, I'm sure. Right, and it's probably a lot less stressful than like mass scale forgery of like ancient artifacts. Like UNESCO is going to be on their ass. Like you're going to be like an international criminal. And you kidnapped a Brit. Right. Out loud.
Again, like he has crossed that line. And yeah, like the length of like, what was his plan after he like unbound and ungagged the professor just to be like, shh, like,
don't tell anyone,
right,
please, that it was me. Honestly, he probably would have like bribed him maybe into joining in his criminal enterprise. I mean, there's a knowledge bank there in the professor, and like he could go out, find more artifacts. They could like work together. But I don't think you persuade someone to work for you by bounding and gagging them and hiding them in an artifact and starving them for some unknown number of days.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that the conversation to partner up after that would have been difficult if Wickles wasn't arrested. So.
Yeah, he was not a strong businessman. But the end of the crime spree of Mr. Wickles. Hopefully.
So do you ever see like when the kids, teens, I guess we should call them,
youth.
when they uncover this this room full of all this stuff? I mean, I guess it's empty when they do it. But do you ever see like who he had working with him, or do we just assume that it was museum staff or random people he just pulled off the street? Like, hey, come on in, I got a job for you. Secret entrance into the museum.
This is the intern work, actually. No, I did wonder that of like, is the museum staff in on it too? Because like Mr. Wickles, like he does not look like, maybe he is the good artist, but I think he's like I think that he was like the mastermind of it. But when he was like, we're going to kidnap this professor, the rest of the staff was like, you've gone too far. Like, we were just trying to churn a pretty penny here and like get some cash on the side. Like, I was like an art student, like dropout, like art school dropout. I'll do the paintings for you. Jimmy over here will do the shipments and arrange the deals. Like, you just tell us where to go. But now you're going to kidnap someone again, a foreign national, like, too far, Wickles. So we don't know how far and deep this operation went, but I have to assume it was not a solo enterprise.
So I'm looking it up. I know that obviously kidnapping.
You're looking at Mr. Wickles?
No, what does he look like?
Mugshot?
No. So kidnapping is almost certain that there's a federal charge there.
Mm-hmm.
Forgery is also a federal charge. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, obviously, almost 1,000% positive. I have not studied forgery since crim law 3 years ago, but I'm almost positive that the criminal penalty for forgery is a lot lighter than it is for kidnapping. Yes. Which actually, so to be clear, kidnapping in itself isn't like a legit crime necessarily. It's more like what do you call it? Not trespassing, but false imprisonment. Sorry, false imprisonment, and there could be like some assault in there, some battery, etc. But it's considered kidnapping. So I could totally see. I guess if there was some museum staff in on it, they're like, look, we're committing one federal crime already with the forgery and probably international crimes as well, because I'm sure that there are treaties through the UN and like UNESCO about not forging art or producing art from other places in the world. Kidnapping though, step too far. Into a murder, attempted murder, a few steps too far.
I truly think it would have
these
gone
random
there.
museum staff. Clearly, I mean, because if they hadn't found that shoe to then uncover where maybe the professor or the Mr. Wickles would have said something like, okay, fine, I'm arrested. Like, let me give up where he is. But let's assume that he wouldn't. Like, let's assume he just kept the professor's whereabouts hidden. Like, if the kids had never found that shoe, he literally would have starved to death in a matter of days, or dehydrated at least, like in a matter of days. So, what was the end goal here? Like, kill this dude?
Right, exactly. And like, we didn't see any of the other museum staff like helping out. So did they even know what the professor did with him? Like, would they have? And also, the kids never again, they literally were like, oh yeah, we forgot about him. The cops maybe wouldn't have known that he was missing because only the kids knew that he was missing and they forgot about it. So like the cops maybe wouldn't even have searched for him until it was too late. So yeah, that one, it started off with a real potential to get dark.
You would have had like the British embassy calling like the governor of whatever state Coolsville is in. Some people say it might be like Florida or something, whatever. Like, call the governor of Florida. Like, oh my God, we think one of our, like, a foreign national has been totally like kidnapped. He's missing. He hasn't been coming to his meetings. He was supposed to meet with someone at this museum and he never showed up.
The interns reported him missing because he didn't get the coffee order in. Like, I think it would have gone to like international courts very quickly.
And if I were the lawyer for the professor, I would actually be charging those teens with some crimes too. Okay, they were technically accessories when you think about it. They knew he was missing and they did nothing to contact the authorities. Like, look, I get that they had good intentions. They wanted to solve the crime, but you guys are not the police. So you at least have to like make it known. Like, because maybe the police could have found them faster than the kids did. So it's like, hey, you know, I'm more damaged and more injured now as a professor because it took you an extra 2 days to find me because you didn't call the damn cops.
And I heard y'all running around the museum ruining things and not helping me. Like,
yeah. Also, I love how Shaggy crashed the plane.
Yes.
I'm going to guess Mystery Inc. does not have any sort of insurance policy.
I bet Daphne's dad paid it off though.
Right. Like, can you imagine how annoyed her parents probably are with her? Like, why do you keep breaking shit and like breaking into buildings? Like, fine, take this blank check and pay off all of the damage.
And just erase it. Just here you go, Daphne. And she was like, God damn it, Scooby. Yeah, Scooby is the one flying the plane, by the way. So.
Oh, that explains it. Well, I don't even think insurance would cover that because that's just
letting
like,
your dog fly anything.
Your rates are going way up if so.
All right. So that's, again, that whole debacle. Thanks for watching / listening, everyone. I don't know, subscribe and stuff, rate, review. Again, subscribe. I don't know what else you're supposed to do. Tell your friends.
Share it.
Talk
about us.
Yeah, talk about
Tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your clergymen, depending on the faith practice that you participate in.
Yeah, if you're
tell
like
everyone.
Knights Templar, still tell the other ones.
Yeah,
the other Knights. We talk about them.
It's all for conversation. We're not criticizing them.
Yeah.
Or the Crusades, at least in that video. I mean, we can talk about that maybe in bonus content. But yeah, tell anyone. Everyone likes it.
Yeah, if you have any episodes that you want us to do, let us know.
Yeah, drop them in the comments. Episode shows. Yeah, it doesn't have to be Scooby-Doo.
Yes.
We plan to look into other shows as well. It turns out a lot of good classic cartoons and animation, they involve some mysteries and some interesting adventures that could use some nice storytelling to break them down. So any other shows you want to hear us talk about, let us know.
Great. All right. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Saturday Morning Mysteries.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share, rate, review, leave us a like, and drop a comment. We post episodes every Saturday and bonus tune tangents whenever we feel like it. So please subscribe so you don't miss the shenanigans.
And if you want to follow us on YouTube, click the bell under the YouTube subscribe button to receive notifications when new videos are posted.
And if you want to subscribe to the podcast, we have no idea what you're listening to us on, so just hit the big subscribe button on whatever app you're using. We believe in you.
Give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at SatmornMist, all the abreves, and let us know if you have any episode or show requests by emailing SaturdayMorningMysteries@gmail.com.
Thanks to Jenna Kendall for the logo design and to Ava Sakiki for the music used during this week's episode.
See y'all groovy kids next week on Saturday Morning Mysteries.